Right. Well, welcome everyone to First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's Tuesday Night Hana. This is the Maui edition. Janelle and I are taking over the from the island of Maui, and so I'm here visiting Tim Rose and his family. So if you see Tim Rose running by or something like that, just don't be alarmed. So yeah, but this is it's exciting. Today is Hana. We're actually, let me do this in the old-fashioned way. I'll make you don't have to see me if you don't want. You can go back to gallery view, but for those who want to see me, you can. We're going to be talking a little bit about membership today and the meaning of membership and some of the philosophies and things like that behind it. And over the last few weeks, we've had a lot of discussions. Really, over the last few years, we've had discussions about membership and things like that. Do you want to say a quick hi, Tim, to everyone? Or, I'm on the meeting. Oh, okay. He has to put a shirt on. Never mind. We've been talking about membership a lot, and one of the ways that we've been sort of looking at this lately is through the lens of making changes to the bylaws and to allow for people to join without a financial contribution. And some of the experiences that we've been having, for me, it's sort of like to me, I'll just give you a little bit of the background. This all kind of started when I was a minister here and doing the stewardship campaigns. And I learned that sometimes people, when we would compile the lists of who could vote and who couldn't. And then there'd be these sort of uncomfortable conversations with people who maybe hadn't pledged within the last 366 days. And people would have to go and kind of figure out what they were doing pledge-wise. There were also some people who it was getting really close to time. This was very rare, but it was getting close to time for a vote and they hadn't pledged within 366 days. So sometimes people would just put in an amount of money in their name because they knew they wanted to be on either one of the councils where you needed to be a member or something like that. So there were a bunch of little things that started to happen that showed that maybe there were some things around membership we needed to talk about. And I started to wonder whether more of a philosophical discussion about what membership means and what church really means is something that we needed to
practical discussion
to have, more comprehensive discussion. So that's part of what this process is. And so we've learned a lot in just the last few weeks. I think people can say that, and I just wanted to give that kind of, to understand this is something that's been happening for years. It's not something someone just woke up and thought, you know what I want to do? I want to do this today. And so, but we're finally talking about it in a more real way. So with that, I just wanted to maybe, I think at this point, I'm trying to remember if there was a story, one of the stories that I wanted to tell. Have I covered everything, Lee? Was this the right? Okay, we did a little bit of prep, but I wanted to bring Lee into the conversation as a member of the 8th Principal Task Force to share some of what she's discovered in the last few months looking at this issue.
Thanks, Reverend TJ. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lee Curran. I'm a member of the 8th Principal Task Force, as are Kathy Gillum and Karen Gold, who are both here. Also Carla Allison, but she's traveling and couldn't join us this evening. So right now I'm going to share some background on the process that got us to this point. So the 8th Principal Task Force started reflecting on our current bylaw requiring an annual pledge as a condition for being an active member and all the benefits that confers back in January of this year. And that was after reading a question posed on Paula Cole-Jones' 8th Principal Learning Community Facebook page. And someone posed the question, how have congregations that have voted for the 8th principle addressed membership status? And it went on to say, if someone feels led to become a member of a congregation, yet has no room for pledges, what happens? So this question did not prompt our first discussion about the financial requirement for membership, but it really galvanized us to dig in a little bit more, actually a lot more. So next, we discuss the inherent classism, which is a form of oppression that is embedded in our current bylaw. And we had conversations about our own experiences with pledging. We discussed the widening the circle process and how this intersects with the pledge requirement. And Kathy, who's on our task force, she is part of the widening the circle study group, and she had some reflections. I contacted West Shore UU Church in Rocky River, Ohio, and they had changed their bylaw and dropped the financial requirement for membership prior to. They reported it was a successful transition. They didn't see any drop in pledging, nor did they see a rise in membership. So we then modeled our proposed bylaw after theirs, and we also included the 8th principle since we had adopted it. After that, we presented to the board our proposal and the rationale, and the board unanimously backed the bylaw change and shared their own stories and reasons for their support. So at this time, I'm inviting Jim and any other board members here who would like to share a bit of the board perspective.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, I mean, logistically, Reverend TJ hit on some of the points. And when we're running meetings, when we're going to the annual meetings, having congregational meetings, we have to determine eligible voters, which means quote unquote valid members. And if you look in the bylaws, there's this lengthy explanation about you have to pledge, there's 366 days, you have to do this, that, and the other. So logistically, there's just a lot that needs to be done. Sue runs these reports, and we look at the reports and we find out, are the reports valid? Logistically, there's just a lot, but you know, that can be handled, that can be done, but it has, as Reverend TJ said, resulted in some uncomfortable conversations because, quite frankly, our records aren't always correct. So it's not nice to have a conversation with someone about, we don't think you're an eligible member, when they say, I just wrote a check, 2 weeks ago. So, it puts everybody in a bad place there, puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So that's from a logistical perspective. But, I think we'll get into more of the spiritual aspects of it, the widening the circle aspects and equality aspects of it as we go further into the conversation. But I just want to point out from a logistical perspective, this is a complicated thing to do.
Thanks, Jim. Did anyone else from the board want to share?
Yeah, I'll share one of the things that it's a personal reason, not logistical reason, that I support it. And I shared this at the board meeting, is that when I was about 13, my mom joined a UU church, and I really enjoyed it, so I would go with her. But she was unable to pledge. And I remember how embarrassed she was every year when she had to go to the committee and tell them why she couldn't pledge and ask them to waive the pledge. And it was always the one thing in that congregation that made me feel separate. It was a large congregation, it was very affluent. And I remember in my youth group, the other people talking about how much their college was going to cost per semester, and in 1999, they're talking about $36,000, this and that. And I was, it always made me feel like an outsider. And now when I'm able to join this congregation and I am able to pledge, it feels really good. And I wouldn't want anyone to feel the way my mom and I felt.
Thank you for that, Janelle. Kathy Gillum, did you want to share yours? It's a very recent story around pledging.
I'm new to First UU, and the spring that I joined, I sent my check in April, or anyway, it was, like 2 or 3 weeks before the annual meeting. And it came time to decide if there was a quorum, and it just took forever. It 20 minutes, and something was wrong. And I kind of, for some reason, I got the feeling that it was that I was the one hanging it up. And so I texted Jim and I asked him if there was some problem with my pledge. And he said, well, we can't find where you have actually pledged. And I said, talk to Carla, because I had sent it directly to her. And so they were able to have a conversation and iron it out. But wow, that hit me hard, because I felt like a real outsider. And it was scary. I'd done everything I could possibly do, and here I was on the outside. So, yeah.
Coffee.
Thank you for that, Kathy. So to finish out this background, I do want to say that the 8th Principal Task Force and the board proposes the requirement of an annual pledge be removed as a condition for being an active member. And this proposed change is consistent with our desire to be welcoming to all, and our belief that a person's ability to financially contribute should not be a barrier to membership or the leadership roles that require membership. So at this point, I would like to make space for any questions about the process. After that, you will have a chance to share about the bylaw, any concerns or anything later on. But right now, regarding the process to how we got to this point, we'd like to entertain questions or concerns. And we do think it's really important to honor this process and to listen to you. So this is your opportunity.
I'm looking for hands, but you can also just speak up, because not everyone has their camera on. We don't need to observe too much.
It's got her hand up.
Oh,
Carol.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Well, I am on Widening the Circle Task Force after Carol was busy attending it one day and suggested I join. Anyway, I found it extremely important, and I agree that we should eliminate that obstacle and it's not unusual. It's not unusual for someone to have finances that just don't allow it.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Mhm.
I saw
And-
Janice had her hand up. I know
Okay.
Dave's got his up, but Janice was.
Great, thanks for the help. We'll go to Janice and then we'll go to Dave. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Janice.
I have a question about the process, because that's what is on the table now, but I also have some other things that I would like to contribute. On each of the cases, and I'm sure there are others that have not been brought to light that have happened in the past, are there ways to address some of these problems without changing the bylaws? For example, if a person's check didn't go through, can you just take their word that they wrote the check? I mean, how fast and firm are these rules that there can't be a little bit of leeway, like you pay the rent, you usually have a grace period, or you just take the person's word that the check is in the mail, or suggesting if a person's coming into a church and knowing their financial situation, offer them to be a friend, which offers a lot of benefits except for voting and being the chair of a person, but it offers them full participation within the church as a friend of the church instead as of a member. So did you explore some of these other avenues besides changing the bylaws?
Yeah, no, we really didn't. And I don't know too much about what you suggested, like a friend versus a member, but it's just kind of landing to me as two-tier membership. And I'm not real comfortable with that, but I don't know a whole lot about these other opportunities or avenues, as you said.
In the UUA, it spells it out very strongly. And I know when I first came in, many, many years ago, that was offered when the pledge drive started, and you could check that box. And I just made a copy of it from the UUA. So that, still could be, a possibility. So that was my question. And then when it opens up for other things, I have my personal opinion on some things too. So thank you.
Can we have Reverend TJ address that maybe?
Yeah, why don't I give just a little bit, and Dave, we will get to you. And then I heard Jim also, but I want to just say that just from the logistical standpoint, I did want to share a little bit of what happens. So the answer is sure. Like we do that sometimes. Like if someone says they sent it in, it's this thing. But what so often happens is it only ever happens at a pinch point. Like we only ever discover there's some sort of problem when it's like essential, when it's like the day of voting, as Kathy said, or when we're counting the rolls and we're calling someone. And so part of it is that we just don't have the kind of regular attention to updating membership status. Like it's one of the many things that Suzette does in her 20 hours a week, and instead of the kind of attention that might work would be someone who's really just dedicated to that, to each individual person, understanding where they are, maybe letting them know 3 months in advance, maybe even, or at the 6-month point, or, there are logistical things that could happen. And with staff that would do it, that's fine. But mostly this has been something that's been a very small part of a few different professional people's portfolios. And there hasn't really been support in the laity to really like make it a thing. So the answer is, yeah, structurally it could be better and those things could be solved that way. But yes, I don't really know if there's really a but after that, but I did want to kind of answer the structural stuff. So
I'm sure Liz, our pronounce her name, has a spreadsheet for that.
all right, I do see lots of hands. We're gonna go Dave, then Kathy, then Mike Young. Yep, I see you, Mike. All right, go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think you can be a member if you give pledge 1 cent.
Right.
There's no bottom limit to the amount of money. So I don't think money has anything to do with it. It's really a larger question of membership itself, of how do you qualify a member, which begs a larger question of, and forgive me because as a planner, I tend to think like this. I could show up with 75 evangelicals and vote you all out. So, and if you don't think that will ever not happen, it might. So what that also talks about in the extreme is, what's the gravity of the sense of the congregation, and how do you define membership as that body around a gravity of purpose? Mm-hmm. And so while I don't have any really concerns about whether you pledge money or not, I think it's not really material, because I could pay for everybody who wanted to join by just giving a penny for everybody under the bylaws, being sort of an ecclesiastical lawyer at a small level. I think the larger question is, what's really the nature of membership, and how do we qualify voting members? And I think I would like to invite you, not this meeting, but some future date, to think about, well, how do you actually qualify as I always describe Unitarian Universalism as individual theology subject to peer review.
Mhm.
So because we are sitting on a large assets, and not often, but once in a while, a small congregation will be raided by opportunists for other reasons. We need to think about this larger question and provide some type of guard to define what a member is.
Thanks,
That's
Dave.
it. Thanks.
If I could, I'll just a few thoughts on that. And I do know that people are in line with hands. As you say, if someone wanted to take over the church for a penny a piece, they could do that already. So I'm not sure how much changing the bylaws, as you say, really matters. And I would go one further. When you say we really need to think about what membership is, we really need to think about what church is. When you say think about what membership is, it's almost like saying what is church, and and that's one of the questions that is a really important one to answer. So thanks for bringing that up. And just for folks who don't know, structurally in this church, there is a nominating committee. Like the board holds the assets of the church in trust. That's the structure of most corporate entities and boards. So you have to actually make it through the nominating committee and then be on the board, and then get the majority of the board to vote to do something. And then anything that's particularly affects the assets of the church, it's then a 2/3 vote of the congregation. I think a hostile or even a loving takeover, it might be a little trickier to more trouble than it's worth for folks. But it would be an amazing short story, one that's probably already been written. Dave, you might want to do that, and then that might be really fun to read. So Kathy, I saw your hand, and then we're going to go to Mike Young. Did you want to speak? Go ahead.
Okay, so in any circle, which is what we're talking about, which is the circle of membership, there's an inside and there's an outside. And to the inside of the circle, membership can possibly be had for a penny. Membership can be on a friends basis and then a full member basis. Membership has many iterations. It takes many forms if you're inside the circle. If you're outside the circle, you don't belong. It doesn't have it. You either belong or you don't belong. And that is hard to get a hold of unless you've been on the outside of the circle. And to be told that you can pledge a penny and be a member to someone who is on the outside of the circle, that's very demeaning.
Yeah.
Or to be told that you can be a friend, you don't have, you may want to be a member, but if you can't pledge, you can be a friend and you can still have privileges. That is not being a member. That's being told no. Albeit politely, but it's being told no. So if we're going to talk about widening the circle and being a welcoming congregation, it means our answer is yes.
Thanks, Kathy. Sorry, I muted to adjust the curtain. Mike, you had your hand up and your fingers were doing the walking. So why don't we hear from you? Yes, I saw that.
A little bit of history way back when. Well, early in my ministry, what would that have been? About 1995 or 6. The issue was raised about the minimum pledge you had to make in order to be a member. The reason for doing it was a very simple reason that has nothing to do with the stuff you guys have been talking about. The reason was that the denomination expected us to pay a certain amount based on the number of members. That's what our contribution to the denomination was based on. That has long since changed. It's no longer the case, but we had to be sure who was and who wasn't a member, because we didn't want to pay for somebody to be a member if in fact they didn't think they were a member. So rather than fuss about it, we simply made it a part of the membership qualifications. And it was made, that's part of the reason why it was made so small amount of money. It's not like you had to have it contribute a large amount. You just had to contribute something. So we had a piece of paper that said you were a member. So far as I am concerned, and in my ministry, whoever says they're a member of the church is.
Yep.
And the interesting irony here is that you have let me talk here, even though technically I am not a member. I am not now, nor was I ever legally a member of the congregation, because in those days, back in those days, there were a lot of we ministers who didn't think the minister should join the congregation since they were his employer. And it was almost always his in the place.
I'm a pledging non-member myself, Mike. It's inappropriate for me to vote on my own salary. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And that's virtually the only thing that's ever on the table. At the, I mean, I don't mean the salary, but the budget is the main thing on the annual meeting. So, but Mike, you raise a really important historical. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. These headphones are delayed.
Well, the reason is simply we were too lazy to do the hard work of checking about who really considered themselves members. It was because it was easier to do that it was done. It was laziness. Get rid of it, please. I'd be glad to urge everybody to vote to get rid of it.
So, yeah, I want to thank you, Mike. And Nancy, I don't want to assume, Nancy, you have nothing to say because you're in the same frame. Nancy, did you have something you wanted to? No, you're okay. That raises a really good thing that some people have brought up and I've heard before. And anyone who's been on the stewardship team or the pledge drive has heard me say this for the last few years, that when we do calls, I do not want anyone saying you should pledge because we have to pay the UUA. Like we let that go. It makes sense. I understand the logic, but and maybe even Lee could speak more to this. The UUA has transformed the way it even looks at the metrics for membership. We've been an honor congregation for more than 10 years. We pay our fair share and we do it with a duty and an exactness that a lot of places don't. And so we're supporting the UUA in the spirit and by the letter that they ask us to. And telling someone that the number of emails I've actually seen, one is too many, and I'm sure people agree with this, but I've seen a number that have heard that reasoning and they say, fine, I'll just pledge the minimum amount that the UUA wants. And then I'll just be a member, if that's all that matters to you, and so we've stopped using that. And I did want to just, Lee, did you want to say anything about this? I think you had done some looking into the UUA's metrics, so.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend TJ. Well, I did reach out to a handful of people, including Suryamani Carpenter, who handles a lot of this behind the scenes. And I was trying to get a sense of how they feel about the proposed change. And I do want to share some of the common concerns and/or questions. The first one, Dave already brought up. Some people were wondering, will people just join the church and take over the church assets? I don't know. Is there any more conversation around that?
How can they do that?
And I think Reverend TJ kind of spoke to that. It would be extremely difficult. We do have, layers of protection with the nominating team and the board, and they're all elected positions and that. So, but that's just my feelings. Did anyone else want to address that?
Yeah, I do. I think what that's assuming is that we don't have any method for interviewing people before they become members, and that's not true. And even the new amendment says that people who join the church agree to support the principles and the views of the UUA. It's not like just people people walk in off the street and say, "Hi, I'm a member." You know, the church has to accept them as members. So that is not quite as scary as it sounds, I hope.
Thanks, Karen. If no one else wants to address that, I'm going to move on to something else that was shared by folks. And we were just talking about this. How about the money we pay per member to the UUA? If people don't pledge, how will that get covered? I don't think we're going to have this dramatic drop in pledges. And I don't think we're going to have this big surge in membership where people aren't pledging. I did talk to Sue, and she said the way the UUA counts membership is very expansive, and we have some discretion, and she particularly, because she's the one that reports it out, has that discretion. So I don't think that's going to be an issue in any way.
And I would just add that it's not like that money's for nothing. It's a subscription to the UU world. It's access to different things. The congregation supporting members who maybe don't pledge the amount that is still gives that member a voice in the wider UU movement and in other ways. So it's enfranchising people. And I feel like I personally think that's a good investment, especially for someone who might be new to Unitarian Universalism or might want to kind of get started. Anyone who's done any development work knows that the most important thing is just to get someone kind of in the conversation, and then trust that over time it'll work out. I intentionally do not see names attached to numbers. I just my own spiritual principle. I don't really want to know who's giving what individually, but I can tell you I have seen numbers, and that there are people at this, the generosity of some people at this church is so profound that they really are, you know, that there is just so much generosity happening, that to think of it in this scarcity mentality of this $100 we need to get from someone or $125, I would really encourage everyone to just look and behold at what is happening around us and not focus so much on that. And I don't think that many people are that worried about it. I think, Mike, you actually shed tremendously helpful light on the germination of that. And so I think we're getting even clearer picture than I had before about the kind of history. So I'm appreciative of that. Thanks so much, Mike. Carolyn, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I want to say that it was years after I joined that I began getting the magazine. Nobody checked
Too.
out. Yeah, I wonder if we shouldn't do some checking each time.
So, and thank you so much for that, Carolyn. Yeah, this comes back to to Janice's question as well, of the structure and the functionality. And I'm not trying to get a new budget line or anything, but I have noticed a trend. For those who don't know, there is now a new professional guild just for membership administrators for Unitarian Universalism. And one of the things about membership administrators is that the skills are so similar from one church to another. Many are able to cobble together an incredible living by serving a number of small congregations with a few hours a week. And so, and they're able to do it from home. Many have children and they can work from home. And it's the kind of work it's the other advantage of that kind of work is that it's not something you usually need to do right now. You can put your family to bed or get them fed and then spend some hours doing it. So it's part of a gig economy that's helping some families. And I'm not saying we're going to hire anyone or do anything, but I think it would be wise to look at something like Carolyn brought up and that Janice brought up, that someone who's really keeping an eye on just this thing and can answer these questions very quickly is just something to maybe think about. And so I just wanted to, again, I'm really not making a pitch. I'm just saying it exists. So
Great.
I see Janice's hand. Yeah.
Okay. I want to just go, maybe it's my Baptist upbringing with pledging and everything, but I think it's beyond that. It's just practicality. And I want to say that the last stewardship and giving pamphlet, they just get better each year. And I think this was so sensitively written and so beautifully explained and so giving in the information. But it's asking for money, and I appreciate that. A church is a business. I mean, aside from all the wonderful things that we do, it has to be run. I don't care if it's a kid trying to figure out how to spend the allowance to anything there's a financial part of it. And by pledging, even the promise little sheet that is coming in before you actually write the check for your pledge, gives the administration an idea of what can be done with running of the building, what can be done in the community and everything. And my concern is there's a certain percentage, because we are human, that putting an offering in the plate from time to time when you're at church is one thing. But when you have a check taken out of your bank account, or you write one check for the year, then it's a
Commitment.
and it's consistent, and a church can run on that. And I just kind of wrote something here. It says, my pledge supports my church that supports my community. And it supports my minister's salary. And each of those things are going to be bringing people into our congregation and into our membership and our church, because we're out in the community. We have had in the past wonderful ministers, and I hope to have one again that is out in the community doing the work and bringing it in. And without that, I guess I'm afraid it's going to become lackadaisical, with people are just going to, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's just human nature. If you don't make a promise, you don't make a pledge, it's like paying any bill. The electric thing is going to get cut off, your rent has to be paid. And if you choose to pledge, you pledge. If you don't choose to pledge, you become a friend, or you visit from time to time and put money in as you donate and attend. That's my concern on a very fundamentalistic, practical basis.
Jim, I saw Jim hand go up. Jim, did you want to say something? And
Yeah, no, I think
Janice?
I think that's an excellent description of how it impacts people who can give money. For people who can't give money, that's going to have a completely different impact, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's from my perspective.
Yeah. So, what I'd like, a lot of what you talked about was how, people who can pledge can provide for others, which is great. And I think as you look at pledging over people's careers, they start out with a little bit, and they, start gradually give more until they can't give more anymore, and it starts tapering off. But people see the value, and they can give more based on the value that they're getting. I think that's something that will continue. But I think what we also have to do is look at not what can we get from a new member, but what can a new member get from us, which is kind of one of the sides that you're talking about, Janice. And a person can come to us for whatever reasons to provide, need spirituality needs, or other needs that they might have that they find that are fulfilled at First Unitarian, but they may not have the money to be able to actually be called that member. And that puts them outside that circle that Kathy was talking about. Whereas if they find commonality with people in this congregation, why can't we embrace them as a member and feed them what they need? Because ultimately they're going to be hopefully in a situation later on where they'll be able to help feed back and feed more people who, like themselves, were unable to contribute financially. I also want to bring up, people say, oh, well, this is easy. Instead of making people pledge dollars, we'll just make them pledge hours. But when you think about people who have really low incomes, a lot of times they don't have hours either. Some are working multiple jobs. Some are working a single job with not much pay, but they're having to take care of families, etc. So there's not necessarily, just because they don't have money doesn't mean they have hours. So I think what I really like to do is start looking at how can we make sure that people who are coming to us to get needs fulfilled can step into that circle that Kathy drew and be members, and we help them and they help us when they can. I'll just stop there. I've been going on too long.
Thanks, Jim. And Kathy, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I don't think we're talking about not pledging. What we're talking about is pledging not being a qualifier for membership. People can pledge.
Please.
But it's
Yes.
not. Yes.
Sorry.
Talking about
Where's Carol?
what we're talking about is it's not a qualifier for membership.
Yeah, I hesitate to invoke this in a thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Jim, and really for your beautiful words. I'm just going to use the UU analogy of public radio, that some people pledge and support their local public radio because for them it is just what is important, and that is one group of people that we love because it, and then other people listen to it and they talk about what they heard. It gives them strength or it scares them. I had to stop listening to public radio for a little while because it was just normalizing insanity. On these calm voices talking about what was happening in the last administration. That's my issue. But public radio is this kind of idea of like, you carry the message in different ways, and there are different ways that people support it. I mean, you know, I pledge. I hold many of the same beliefs that anyone else does who pledges, and I'm blessed that I can do that. And I don't honestly even think of my pledge as helping someone who can't. I don't think about it that way. I think about it of a percentage of some way that, you know, that when we flick the switch, the light goes on. When this other thing happens, some percentage of all of that is what's happening. And one of the things we really consider when we're spending money, like I've been in board meetings, I've worked with the emergency fund, I've done all these things, is how are we honoring the gifts of the congregation? And there's so many different gifts that are given, and they're all honored in different ways. And so it is an ethic at this church in leadership to be cognizant of honoring all the gifts that are given. And I think, I don't mean to be preaching, but I do think we are getting at how are we fully honoring all the gifts? How are we being more embracing about the gifts that people are giving? I mean, Jim really said it very cogently in his comments. So yeah. Any other, I'm going to scan through, but please just speak up if I don't. I'm in the little square zone and I'm looking. Ellen, yes, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, when you think of your relationship to the church, those friends with benefits things, they start out great, but they don't end well.
Preach, Ellen, preach. That's right. Thank you. Were there any other, Lee, did you have any other things you learned?
There were a couple other concerns expressed, and I think we've touched on them somewhat already. People wondered if people are not expected to pledge, or if it's not a requirement or a qualifier, as Kathy mentioned, maybe they may not feel fully vested in the church. And to piggyback on that, someone wondered if the proposed bylaws, we wrote it, does it make assumptions that potentially take away people's sense of pride and agency? And someone else wondered, is it fair to members who do pledge? Any thoughts around those concerns or questions or wonderings?
If I may, I'm not seeing anyone's hands. I think this also comes back to sort of reception and philosophy. Like how are we receiving and honoring the gifts? You know, and I can imagine, and I'm not saying it's this church. I think this church does a very good job at honoring the gifts. But there can be times I can imagine where for so long, the habit of a church has been to prize the financial contributions as different and separate from other kinds of contributions. And I don't know if some aspect of that is there. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But the one thing I do want to say about this area and about finance is that we've made it through 47 minutes of a Pau Hana talking about one of the hardest things to talk about, which is money and personal finance and our personal relationship to money. And for me to have I would almost say that like having a sense of how somebody else actually feels in their gut about money might be one of the hardest things ever to fully understand about another human being. I don't know why it is, but there is something that, so we're hearing, some of these things, and I just want to hold up that they are coming from a real felt experiential place for people. And that, talking about money is one of the hardest things to do. Whenever I counsel wedding people who want to get married with me, I don't do a lot of weddings because there's a lot of pre-wedding work you have to do with me. But one of the conversations we have is money, and we get real clear about any secret credit cards. I mean, there's all, and I have heard some stuff, friends. And so it's like, I mean, it's adorable. And, but yeah, it's intimate stuff. And I just want to hold that there and not, does that make sense? It's just that we're hearing things that are coming up. And I just want in the course of the months or the times that we're going to be considering this, I just want us all to remember how hard it is to fully grasp how somebody feels about money truly. And if you really want to get to know someone, try to figure out how they feel about money. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, Reverend TJ.
Oh, Mike Scott is our treasurer. Speaking of how people feel about money.
Go ahead, Mike.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you want to speak as a member, Mike, I apologize. I shouldn't just cast you as treasurer.
All right.
Okay.
It's going to be a mixed comment in that regard.
Okay.
I have to say that virtually every discussion that I have had over the years as treasurer and before I became treasurer, when we talk about the bigger part of budget was staffing, the issue is always virtually inevitably brought up by someone that we always have the choice. We can hire someone to do a certain job, or we can do it with volunteer effort. And to me, that's all. And then we make a decision. What do we want to have professionals deal with? And what do we want to do ourselves? And that is a tacit acknowledgement every single time of the value that people make with their voluntary efforts, not monetary, but nonetheless extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, these questions about values and when we make decisions about how we staff or how we contribute or who does what and who does what. Thanks for bringing that to the fore, Mike. Kathy, I think I saw your hand, correct? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Join us.
I just wanted to say for me, giving back is a function of my gratitude for belonging. And I don't know if I'm sure everyone has their own motivation for giving back. But that's where it comes from me, is from a place of gratitude. So, and I couldn't be grateful if there weren't something extended to me, and that I had gotten something that I really treasure. So I think that's at the basis of being welcoming. and to, saying yes, is that people sort of come in out of the cold, as it were. And if they come from a place of gratitude, then the giving back will happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. I think that's a preface to any good book about church giving. You just gave us a good beginning. Thank you. Any other questions, or Lee, did you have anything else that people had brought up that you want to mention?
Sue Yamani Carpenter emailed today, and she was happy to share this with everyone. She was wondering if the pledge requirement is eliminated, and this is what Jim Cooper spoke to. Should attendance at church or in other church activities like Chalice Circle or serving the congregation in some way, such as perhaps helping with hospitality or coming to the work parties, should that be replacing the financial requirement for active membership? Like, she was kind of wondering, like, how do we keep track of who's actually an active member?
Yeah, I mean, and we've heard that question a few times, which comes also from the question of practicality. It's like, we got to have a thing, and how we do that. And so, and then there's also in that is the question of perhaps implying that, well, if you can't give money, you should do this other thing. And I'm just going to say again, this is sort of a philosophical take, and it's about a culture shift of how we honor gifts. Because I mean, I attended a really interesting membership seminar that was given by the membership professional at the Phoenix Church, and all this amazing professional does is membership, so she has time to think about these cool things. But she presented this like path but it was for everyone. So they made the decision that it was like some kind of contribution or something like that, and some kind of metric of like, joining one parade and attending 2 additional things, or volunteering to teach Sunday school 4 times a year, or whatever. She just made it part of the philosophy of the church, so that in a sense you could look at it and say, oh, well, these people are making someone work if they can't pay. Or in the hands of a professional or a church that's made this decision to just honor all of these things equally, it's just what that person did that year to be a member. So I'm not saying it's the only answer, but that those ideas sometimes come from a totally rational, reasonable place. It's all just kind of how they're applied. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, TJ. I just want to invite Karen Gold to share her family's story around membership that really relates to this.
When I was growing up, I was raised by a single mother who was a school teacher and didn't have a very good salary back in the 1960s. And we belonged to a large Methodist church, and she was not able to tithe or pledge. And so she taught Sunday school, and teaching Sunday school in a Methodist church is like teaching school, because they have grade level workbooks. We were a big church, so we had enough students for each grade level separately. And so of course they needed a lot of teachers to do that. But my mother, as a single mom, was teaching 5 days a week, going to school at night to get her master's degree, going into her classroom on the weekends to prepare for the week and taking us with her. And then on top of that, she was teaching Sunday school at the church. And so she was teaching 6 days a week, plus, doing her other prep work. So she was basically working 7 days a week. And eventually she got to the point where she did make enough money and she was able to pledge. But church was very important for her. It was instrumental in getting her out of a bad marriage. and she really felt like she owed something to the church. But I was young at the time, so I didn't really understand all the implications. It was like, oh, mom teaches Sunday school just like she teaches school during the week. But it was, it was something that it's nice that she felt obligated to do it, but on the other hand, she shouldn't have felt obligated. She had enough on her plate. So that's just my take on the quid pro quo of volunteer hours for not pledging.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Karen, for sharing that. Yeah.
Did somebody
know-
else have their hand up?
Oh, was there another hand? Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't see one. Go ahead, Reverend TJ.
No, I was just going to say that so often in any kind of analysis we've done over the last few years together of race, class, of things like that, like so often it also comes down to money, and it comes down to our relationship with money as a culture, as a country, so this is sensitive work, and you better believe it is anti-oppression work. And so if you're feeling something in your body being like, oh, this feels funny, like this feels uncomfortable, but in other parts of you feeling, oh, this is liberative, this is good, like it's because it's coming from a place that for a lot of people it's tied. And so we've heard stories about sort of liberation and freedom that comes from our relationship with money and kind of fixing that. And we've heard stories about real deep concern about the future of the church and the church's finances, like Dave Havner brought up and other people. So, I just wanted to hold up how much we're all actually holding in this conversation, because it's a fair amount. So, yeah.
And one last concern that came up in every single conversation was that in light of Reverend TJ's upcoming departure, is this a good time to change the membership bylaw?
So I think, is this a good time is always a good question for people. And I don't think there's any emergency, and I did kind of bring up earlier long ago in this process, wondering about trying to manage this at the same meeting as we're trying to pass the budget. I'm not making any, I know we'll talk more about that, but it's one of those things that, as we've all heard already, how deep people feel and how many questions there really still are. It's a totally legitimate question. Is now the time? And I think that's a question we all need to ask. And I don't think it's an unreasonable question for the whole church to kind of really think about personally. So, yeah.
Nancy,
Are there? Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
Yeah, I have an opinion about that. I think there's all this piecemeal bylaw change is a real pain, because you really, there's probably a lot of other things in the bylaws that could be tweaked. And it would be nice just to have it like, there was something that we were going to have a bylaws review every 5 years, or there was a time period. And it would be nice if we could stick to something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just I'll ask as the board president here, just from a show of hands. I mean, currently there's a vote on this scheduled for the June 5th annual meeting. We've had this session. There's going to be 2 more sessions on the 15th and 29th. How many people feel like we could benefit by extending discussions beyond June 5th and perhaps removing this from the discussion on June 5th? Just a show of hands.
Yeah, just keep your hands up. We just want to kind of get a.
Oh.
5, 6. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all for that. Appreciate that.
As I listen to some of people's experience in that stuff, my mind is broadening. And I would like to hear more of that. This is my first entry into a different way of looking things. And I appreciate the discussions, and I would like to hear more of that. And I think putting it off for a while and having us time. This is actually the first time I think that I really realized what it's been about. I went to the board meeting, this recent board meeting, because I knew that there was going to be some discussion, but it ended up being rather shortened because they had to go into executive session. So it was like, oh yeah, this is what it's about. And I really didn't know what this was about. And even in the Hana thing, it gave a title, but it didn't say what it was about. So I think the information needs to be out there and processed for a lot longer than it has been just recently, at least in my experience, been presented to us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janice.
Thanks, Janice.
Oh, and I just want to say I was doing some research about other churches and stuff. One church has a barcode for each member. So you have a barcode when you enter, so they know when you are in attendance or when you know you're being active.
Praise God.
Which-
Yay.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
really
in
interesting.
fact, I'm not going to scare anyone, but actually large churches are one of the primary customers for facial recognition software. So you don't even have to, and they have the cameras mounted at the doors, so they know exactly who came every Sunday. And you keep a biometric scan on file. I'm not joking. They are one of the drivers of that. It's the perfect technology for them because it's so unobtrusive and doesn't require, say, a barcode or a QR code. So thanks for that.
You do know there's a book about that, right, TJ? Watching that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So friends, thank you for this time. I think I don't want to speak to Jim or Lee, or I think some other people are going to speak offline about whether it's maybe taking this off the agenda for the June 5th meeting makes sense, but it is sounding like something like that might happen. But can I tell everyone to stay tuned? Jim, do you want to speak? Yeah, I'm way out of my depth.
Well, I just wanted to end by saying I want to thank the 8th Principal Task Force for recognizing this issue and researching this issue and bringing this issue to the board and to the congregation. As Lee said, the board did unanimously agree that this is the right way for us to move forward. Thanks to all of you who participated tonight, gave your thoughts and views. These discussions are really important to get the feel for how this church wants to be moving forward. So thank you all. Thanks, 8th Principal Task Force. That's all I had to say, Reverend TJ. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, and I would encourage, this will go out tomorrow with our weekly bulletin. And if you have friends that weren't here, just send this to them and say you won't talk to them until they've watched the whole thing. No, I'm kidding. But really consider having people take a look at this. I think it's an important Hana, and I think it'll be helpful. And I did want to, since Janice mentioned how much she liked her the brochure, I did want to thank Carolyn personally for putting it through another pass this year. Carolyn is really an exceptional writer, and her ear for language is phenomenal. So thanks, Carolyn. So yeah, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night. I'm going to put a vegan lasagna in the oven. So that is my plan.
Okay. It's so
All right.
important that we know what you're doing for dinner.
That's my Tuesday tradition. It's the Tuesday. It's a vegan lasagna for Tim and his family. So that's the plan. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Aloha.
Yeah, thank you.